Welcome back to part 2 of the sock knitting tutorial. So by this point you should have gone ahead and finished your leg. This is what mine looks like. Turn it the right way so it looks like a sock. So I've done 20 rounds for the leg. And now is the super exciting part. We're going to be putting in the heel today. So you have two choices. You can either knit the heel in the same yarn that you're already knitting the sock in, or you can choose a contrast colour. So I am going to be using a contrast colour in this yellow, which I'm hoping is going to show up well on the camera. Right, so you've just finished your correct amount of rounds for the leg. As I've said to you before, this is the start of the round, this is the tail that I've got on. You might have a stitch marker on. The first needle that you work on is always the top of the sock, and the second needle is the back. And your heel will always go into the back. So we need to get to that point where we can put the heel in. So we're going to knit across the first 32 stitches. So slide all your stitches on to needle 1 and knit across your first 32 stitches and then stop. Don't carry on. So we're just gonna knit away across the first 32 stitches. I'm gonna knit the entire heel with you, so this video might be a little bit longer, but with it being the heel, I want to make sure I've covered everything. So over we go, nearly at the end of this one. Right, excuse me. So that's the first 32 stitches knit in the main colour. So turn your work around and pull your needle through the other stitches. So this is the back of the sock. From this point forward, we are going to be going backwards and forwards across just these stitches. So we're not working in the round at the moment, not while we're doing the heel at all. So we're just backwards and forwards across these stitches. If you want to do your heel in the same yarn that you're using for the rest of the sock, just carry on with this yarn. I'm not going to. I'm going to trim that there, and I'm going to be using a contrast colour. So what we're going to do is there are 32 stitches on here, and we're going to knit 31. So we're going to not work this very last stitch. So using your new colour or the same yarn if that's what you're using, knit across 31 stitches. Remember not to knit that last stitch. So we're just going across. This is my favourite heel. It's the one that I always use. Oh, this yellow looks quite good with this colour I've got here. Right, nearly there. Now don't panic, it's a little bit, it's not tricky, you just got to think about what you're doing. So we've knit across 31 stitches and we have one stitch left here. If you look underneath this stitch, can you see the stitch underneath it? We're going to be picking up the right leg of that stitch underneath. So that's the stitch we've got on the needle. Stitch underneath is here. So this is the stitch here. And we just want that right leg. So you take your needle and you pick up the right leg of that stitch and you hook it on to that needle. So you've got 2 stitches now on that needle. Excuse the dog barking in the background there. So you've got 2 stitches on that needle. The stitch that you've just hooked on, we're just going to knit that. Take it off and then pop it back onto that needle. So can you see now you've got 2 stitches from that same stitch? Can you see? You've got 2 hoops from that same stitch. And you're going to leave it on this left needle. And you're going to leave those on the left needle. Turn your work. So your work now looks like this. Those funny little twin stitches are now on the right hand needle, and we're going to purl across, but we're not going to work that last stitch. So purl across every single stitch. Remember, we're just working on them same 32 stitches on the second needle. So purl across. They're really easy to see because that's the twin stitch there, and these are all single stitches. I'm going to go across every single stitch, but not the last one. And this is building the first part of the heel. All the way across. Now this first one on this side again is a little bit tricky because we've used a contrast colour, but don't worry. Now this is the last purl stitch. Just pull that tail tight. You can see what I mean. You know how a purl stitch has a collar? Can you see the collar on the purl stitch? That's what we're going to be using. So we're going to slip that stitch onto the right hand needle. Pull the yarn tail a little bit tight so we can make it clear. And the collar that's around the purl, we're going to lift that up and we're going to purl that collar. Like that. So now that has 2 stitches coming out of that same purl collar, and then we're going to slip them back to the left hand needle. My camera cut out and I didn't realise it had done it, so I've gone ahead and done an extra row here. I did not realise that camera had cut out. So this is where you've just seen me on this first twin stitch. So I have actually gone ahead and done another row. Don't panic, it's not going to make a difference to the tutorial. I had no idea that camera had cut out. So you've got your twin stitch on the left needle. Just pretend this is your first one. Ignore that I've already done one. You've got your twin stitch on the left needle. You've moved it back over, and what we're going to do now is we're going to turn the work. And we are going to knit across to the stitch before your last twin stitch. I've gone ahead and done 2. You've probably only got 1 at this point. But we're going to knit across and... where are we? Can't find my yarn. Just make sure, because your tails are quite close together, you're picking up your working yarn and not your tail. So knit across to the stitch before the last twin stitch. Keep going all the way across. What we're doing here is we're building the first half of the heel, so we're going to have 11 twin stitches on each side of the needle and 10 live stitches in the middle. That's how we're going to be doing it. So we're coming up to the stitch before the last twin stitch. And here we are. So we want a stitch underneath, and we want the right leg of the stitch underneath. So here's the stitch underneath. We want the right leg of that, which is there. You're going to lift that up and place it onto your left needle. You can keep the other stitches held by your nail if you want to make it easier, just to keep them separate. And that stitch we've just lifted up, we're going to knit into it. Knit that stitch, and then we're going to lift that back onto the left needle. So now you have 2 loops coming out of that same stitch. So you'll have 2 twin stitches at this point. I've got 3. You see? So we've got them moved back to the left needle, and now we need to go ahead and we need to do the same thing on the purl side. So turn your work again. This part of building the heel, so purl across to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch, and this part of building the heel gets quicker and quicker because you're only going across as far as the last twin stitch. So it gets quicker and quicker as you're doing it. So purl across to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch, all the way across. And you won't see anything happening at this point. It'll look like you're just creating a giant flap on your sock. The magic happens on the second half. So we're going all the way across, just coming up to the end now. And here we are. There's my other 2 twin stitches. And here's my one that I'm going to work into. So that purl stitch there, I'm going to transfer to the right hand needle, and we're going to be working into the collar on the purl stitch. So put your needle into the collar, keep it on your left hand needle, and purl into that. There you go. And now you've got 2 stitches coming out of that same purl collar, but we need it on the left hand needle. So we're just going to slip a little twin stitch onto the left needle. Once you've made it, you always need to make sure the twin stitch needs to be slipped to the left hand needle so you can come back and knit the other side. So now I've got 3 twin stitches on my left needle. So I'm going to turn the work. And now I'm going to knit across again to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. All the way across. And it does become quite mindful as you're doing it. All the way across. I do like this yellow with this yarn. I hope it's not blowing out on the camera. I've actually started knitting socks for Danny now. I've got too many socks on the go. And I always use these Knit Pro needles as well. They're my favourite. I have ChowGoos for my standard knitting, but I like Knit Pros for sock knitting. There we go. Right, so there's my stitch before the last twin stitches. They're really easy to see, these twin stitches, because you can see there's sort of, they look different from the other ones. So again, we want to go into the stitch below. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to see. Can you see? It's that one there. There. I want to pick up the right leg So that is the entire stitch, and we only want the right leg of it. And we're going to slip that, hold the other stitches with your nail, slip that onto the left needle, and then knit that, just that bit. And then now we've got it on the right needle, we just need to slip it back to the left needle, and there we go, another twin stitch done. So I'm at 4 now. Apologies for you only being at 3. So now we're going to purl back again to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. You see, it is just knits and purls still, no scariness, knits and purls. Knitting is always knits and purls. So purl all the way across to the last twin stitch. The stitch before the last twin stitch, sorry. All the way across. And there you go. Sometimes if it's tricky to see, if you're not sure if it's a twin stitch, you can separate them with your finger. It doesn't matter if they cross over each other, don't worry about that. You see this one's crossed over the other one. They don't have to be straight, don't panic. So this is my stitch before, so it's the purl side. So first of all, I'm going to slip that stitch onto the right hand needle, and then I want to go into the collar and then purl that stitch like that. And now I need it on my left needle, so slip the 2 little loops over to the left hand side, and that's it. I'll turn our work. You can see now we've got 4 on this side. If you can see this clearly, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 on that side. So we're going to keep going. So knit across to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. We want 11 twin stitches on each side and 10 normal stitches in the middle to start the next part of the heel. So knit across, all the way across to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. Here we are. And again, we want the right leg of the stitch underneath. Slip it onto the needle, knit that little hoop, and then slip it back. Turn your work and purl to 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. See, the rows are getting quite a bit quicker now. And I do encourage you to experiment. Once you've made your pair of socks, go off and experiment. Try everything. Try all the heels, try all the methods. Give 9-inch circulars a go. I'm still learning with them. I've got a pair on the go in 9-inch circulars at the moment. I'm determined to master them. But try everything. So here we are, 1 stitch before the last twin stitch. Slip the purl stitch onto the right needle. Needle into its collar. And purl. And then slip that back, both loops, onto the left needle and turn your work. And like I say, this bit goes quite quick because each row is getting shorter and shorter. If you were doing a 60-inch sock, you would have 10 twin stitches on each side and 10 normal stitches in the middle. You sort of divide it into 3 even numbers. With a 32-inch sock, a 32-stitch sock, you have 11 twin stitches on each side and 10 in the middle. Here we are again. Pick up the right leg. Pop it onto the left needle. Knit that stitch and slip it back to the left needle. And turn your work and carry on. So we're just carrying on like this all the way across until, like I say, we have 11 twin stitches on each side. That's 2 gorgeous butterflies just come right up to the window in the lounge. So pretty. And here we are again. And we just keep going. How many stitches have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A little bit to go yet. So, for those of you that watch the Little Drops of Wonderful podcast, Strictly Sock Along is starting soon. So hopefully, if you've watched the tutorial, you can enter into Ali's Strictly Sock Along, which is just fantastic. I think she's run it, you know, for about 6 years now. I love Strictly. I don't actually watch Strictly, so I'm one of the cheaters. Go lift the right leg up. Yeah, so I always have to cheat when I enter socks into Ali's sock along. Oops. But yeah, I do love Strictly season. Any excuse to knit more socks, I will take. And I believe Craft House Magic is holding a summer sock along. I don't know when that ends actually. And Dia Designs is holding one for the rest of the year. So knit your socks and enter them. Hop on over to Denise at Dia Designs podcast and you can enter your first pair of socks into Dia Designs Sock Along. It's running for the rest of the year, so you've got Ali's you can enter and Denise's. And you never know, you might win a prize. So Ali's channel is The Little Drops of Wonderful and Denise's channel is Dia Designs. I'll link them down below. Because if you're going to knit socks, you may as well enter them into some sock alongs. Right, so pick up the right leg, pop it onto that left needle, knit it and slide it back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, we're getting close now. If you can hear that sneezing, that's Josh upstairs. He has a dust allergy, so when he wakes up on a morning, all you can hear is him sneezing. Not that my house is incredibly dusty, it's just the slightest little bit of dust gets to him. When he was a baby, I used to have to freeze all of his teddies. Right, here we go. I don't think I've caught that one right. There we go. Nope. There we go. You see, it doesn't really look at the moment like you're doing very much. It just looks like you're knitting a big square. You'll see in the next part where the magic happens. I think I'm at 10 now after this one. Turn the work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 I'm at, not 10. That one. Turn the work again. Everyone's been very quiet in my house at the moment. Nobody dare speak because I'm filming a tutorial. It's a little bit awkward actually. My house is never this quiet. There's always lots going on. So it feels really weird. And that one. Let me just double check them numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, so one more now. If you need to pause the video to catch up, you can do that. So once you've got 11 twin stitches on either side of your needle, if you're doing 32 stitches, Then you need to stop after your purl row. That's my purl row there. So now I have 11 stitches on each side, and this is what I'm left with at the moment. So if you're not at that point yet, just pause the video until you get to that point, and then we're going to start building the second half of the heel. So now we're going to start building the second half of the heel. So this is the position that you're in. You've just finished your purl row. And what we're going to do here is we're going to knit across all these single stitches, and we're going to knit that first twin stitch. Okay, so we're going to knit across the 10 single stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And now this is our first twin stitch. We're going to knit through both those loops of that twin stitch and knit that one. This second twin stitch, we're gonna turn it into a triple stitch. So just like you've been doing for the twin stitches, it's absolutely no different. You're just gonna have a really bulky stitch. So we're gonna pick up the loop that's around both stitches. Can you see? There's both your stitches, and this is a loop that's around them. We're going to pick that up, hold the other 2 stitches with your nail, and we're going to pop that onto the left hand needle. Then we're going to knit that same loop and then slip that stitch back onto the left hand needle. And can you see it's created 3 stitches now coming out of that same stitch? Then we're going to turn our work. You're going to purl across until you come to that first twin stitch on the purl side. This is the first twin stitch on the purl side. We're going to knit that first one, purl that first one, sorry, not knit. Purl that first one, and this is the second one. So just like we've done before, slip the twin stitch, both loops of it, onto the right hand needle, and put your needle into the collar of that stitch and purl that loop. Just the same way you've been doing before. Now you've got 3 loops coming out of that collar, can you see? And then slip all 3 loops back to your left hand needle and then turn your work. And now you're going to knit right up to that triple stitch that we've just done. So when you get to that triple stitch, you'll see it now. It's really easy to see because it's so bulky. There's 3 hoops on it. There it is. There's our triple stitch. You're going to knit that. So go, make sure you catch all 3 loops when you go through, and just now knit that. And now you're left with a twin stitch. So just like we've been doing, lift up that loop, pop it onto your right needle and knit that. Sorry, pop it onto your left needle. Knit that and slide it back. So now you have 3 loops on your left needle. Turn your work. And we're going to purl all the way over to the triple stitch. And you guessed it, we're going to knit that stitch. No, purl that stitch. That's the second time I've done that. So purl all the way over to that triple stitch. Again, it's really easy to see because at this point it's really bulky. It's got 3 loops coming out of it. Here it is. So purl, make sure your needle goes through all 3 loops, purl that stitch, and then your next twin stitch you're going to slip onto your right needle. So now we lift up the collar and purl that, and then transfer that back over to the left hand needle. There we go. Turn your work, and you're going to knit across to your next triple stitch, exactly the same as we've been doing all the way through. Knit all the way across. See, the rows this time are getting slightly longer each time. All the way across. And this is our triple stitch, so we're going to knit that one. Make sure you're catching all of the loops. And the next twin stitch, pick up the loop underneath, pop that onto your left needle and knit that, then pop the loop back to your left needle, and now you've got a triple stitch. Can you see what's happening now? You're creating this little tiny heel. Can you see that? Turn your work, purl across, until you get to your next triple stitch. And this is where the heel really takes shape. Here we are. Purl that triple stitch, and then slide the next twin stitch onto your right needle. Your needle into the collar and purl that. And then slide all 3 loops back to your left hand needle. Now you're going to do that all the way across, and when you get to the point where you've got 1 stitch, or actually when you get to 2 stitches from the end, I'll pop back. So just keep going all the way across, and I'll be back when we get to these final 2 stitches. Otherwise this video is going to be so long. I think we're already at half an hour. So just keep going. Remember, when you get to your triple stitch, just knit that or purl that, and the next twin stitch next to it, you turn it into a triple. So just keep going, and I'll meet you back here when we get to 2 stitches from the end. Right, so this is the stage that I've got up to. I've got 2 twin stitches left on the right needle and 2 twin stitches left on the left needle, and you can see the heel now has really taken shape. So I'm going to knit across. Sorry if you can hear that background noise, somebody's decided to wash up. Knit all the way across to that twin stitch on the twin knit stitch. All the way across here. Very nearly done the heel now. So we're going to knit that triple stitch. And on this last stitch here, we're going to turn this one into a triple. turn this around. So this is the last stitch. Slip it onto the right needle. Because it's the last stitch, you've got a tail coming off this. It will be a little bit loose, but you can still get your collar and turn that into a triple. Then slide that back to the left needle. Now this last knit row is our last row of the heel. So we are going to knit across. You knit all the way across this row, but when you get to the end of the row, that is the heel completed. Now, you'll notice that we haven't worked this last triple stitch. Don't worry about that. On the first round of the knitting, we'll just knit that as one stitch, so don't worry about that. So all the way across. When you come to your last triple stitch, just knit it as normal. Make sure you're catching all the loops, and that is your heel completed. That's how your heel will look. So what we're going to do now is we're going to begin working into the round again now for the foot. So I'm going to take off my contrast yarn now. You'll see my original yarn tail means I'm back at the start of the round. I'll pop a stitch marker on, make it easier to know which is the start of the round and which isn't. I'm just going to pop a stitch marker on. It's really easy though now because you know that the heel is always on the back. Right, so all we're going to do now, move our contrast yarn out of the way, and we are going to rejoin our main colour, and we are going to begin working in the round again. So this is your needle 1, needle 2 has the heel on it. Take your main colour, and just, my stitch marker's not closed properly, there we go, and just knit now all the way around every stitch. So we're just going to knit all the way across needle 1. I'm sorry if you can hear the dog snoring. She's right there. Right, I'll try and talk over the snoring dog. And he's going to knit all the way around now. And this is now starting the foot of your sock. So you've done the cuff, you've done the heel, which was the trickiest part, but something I always enjoy. And now we are working at the foot. The end stitches can be a little bit loose because that's where we cut the yarn. Turn your work, slide your next lot of stitches. These are your heel stitches onto your needle. Now the first one that you come across is that triple stitch there. that didn't get worked. So make sure you get all 3 loops of that triple stitch, and that'll just disappear now into the work. And then just knit across like you've been doing, all the way across. Pull that tight. And then we are just back to knitting around and around and around. So I'm going to do another row with you of just the plain knit stitch, but that's all the foot of the sock is. It's just knitting, there's nothing else. And then when we get to the end of this row, we're just going to carry on, or end of this round, sorry, we're just going to carry on to the next round. And that's all there is to it. Part 3 will be the toe of the sock, and then you will have finished. This stitch is a little bit loose because it's a one with a tail on it. Oops. Turn your work again. What you might find easier at this point is to tuck those tails inside and pull them through the sock so they're just out of the way. The next couple of rounds you're going to have to just keep tightening them tails. If you've not used a contrast yarn, you won't have that issue. But yeah, that's your heel. So now, the next round, my stitch marker. I know I'm at the start of the round because I'm on the front of the sock, you see. The heel's on the back, so if I was that way, that'd be halfway through the round. So we're just going to do another, I'll do another round with you, and then I will leave you to do the foot of the sock. It's just knitting, there's nothing else, so you're just knitting all the way around. Like I said, just might need to tug these yarn tails a bit if they keep coming loose. Once I've got about 4 rounds in after the heel, I do weave in those yarn tails. And if you've got any little gaps on the side of the heel or anything like that, you can use the yarn tails to close them gaps. You don't tend to with the shadow wrap heel, but sometimes it does happen. So how long you knit your foot is dependent on the size of your foot. So I'm a size 6 and I have a 9-inch foot. I don't like my socks too tight, so I do knit. Oh, sorry, I just knocked the camera there. I do knit for 9 inches of the sock. So your heel takes up 2 inches and your toe will take up 2 inches. So if, like me, you have a 9-inch sock, you will knit 5 inches for the foot. Now, if you've done a contrast heel, that's really easy to measure because you can see where the heel ends and the foot starts. If you've done the heel in the same colour, you'll measure from the very end of the heel, and you'll need to take that number into account. So if you're doing 9 inches, work until your work measures 7 inches, which is from the end of the heel to the end of your work. And then obviously we'll have 2 inches for the toe, which will give you then, by the time we've finished, a 9-inch sock. For me, it's about 54 rounds. I do count the rounds. Every 10 rounds I put a stitch marker in, and I end up 54 rounds is about right. I can stretch it to 56 if I'm doing stripy socks and I don't want to end it at 54. I can stretch it to 56 and it'll still fit me. But about 54 rounds is fine for me. So give that a little tug. This is what we've got now. We've got the cuff of our sock, and we are starting on the heel. So that's how it looks from the side. So if you work, like I say, if you're a 6-inch sock, you're going to need to work 5 inches. No, a size 6 sock, you're going to need to work 5 inches of this stocking stitch round for the foot. Just measure your foot. Say you've got an 8-inch foot. 2 of those inches will be taken by the heel and 2 of those inches will be taken by the toe. So you will only need to work 4 inches for your foot if you have an 8-inch foot. So that's all you need to do now. So I'm going to work 54 rounds of just plain knitting. I'll do one more round with you. Just knitting round and round and round. You can get sock rulers. I've never used them, to be honest. I've never needed one. I do find it easier to count my rounds for the sock rather than doing measurements. I know 54 rounds is about right for me. So if you don't want to measure and you're a size 6, go for 54 rounds. But you'll see as your stock starts taking shape. You can also measure it by trying it on. And once your work comes to halfway up your little toe, it's time to start your toe. So if you want to do it that way and you don't want to measure at all, just keep knitting and keep trying it on. And like I say, once it gets to halfway up your little toe, then it's time to start your toe. That's another way of doing it. You can buy special sock rulers, like I say. But I've never felt the need for one. But they might be really good, I don't know. Never tried one. It might be a game changer. At least the dog stopped snoring now anyway. Now Finlay's eating crisps. It's about time to end this tutorial. It's lunchtime here. Otherwise you're going to hear crisps rattling. I'm just finishing up this round now. There we go. And like I said, the foot is now just knitting around and around again. You can see that's my main colour that I've started with. So when you measure, if you've done a contrast heel, measure from this point to the end of your work. And once you get to 5 inches, you know, or however long your sock is. If you're a size 6 sock like me, you'd work for 5 inches. If you're a size 5 sock, you're probably going to work for 4 inches. If you've not done a contrast heel, just take into account these other 2 inches. Your heel takes up 2 inches and your toe takes up 2 inches. So however big your foot is, minus off the 4 inches for your heel and toe, and what you're left with is how long you need your foot. Okay? So if you've not done a contrast heel and you're a size 6, you're going to measure from here to 2 inches for your heel. So you'd need 9 inches for a size 6. I think I'm making this sound much more complicated than it is. You'd need 9 inches for a size 6. You take off the 2 inches for your toe, which gives you 7 inches. So you'd measure from here until the end of your work until you've got 7 inches. If you've put a contrast heel in, it is easier to measure from this point rather than trying to measure from this point. I find it easier, you might not. But that's basically it. You're just going around and around now. It looks like a little puppet, doesn't it? Around and around now for your foot. And I will meet you back in part 3 when we are going to be adding the heel. So well done everybody so far. I will see you in part 3.